For a very long time, Doom 64 was a game that I really overlooked compared to all the other Doom games. Out of the entire series, it was the last one I actually played when exploring all of these games. I used to hate the game with a burning passion, but after that, for a while I didn't really know if I liked it or not. I've never liked it as much as the other entries in the series, but it's never really been something that I've played all too much, with my previous play sessions on Doom 64 only ever lasting up until like the 4th level or so. But when I asked which game you guys want to see next on the channel, Doom 64 was the clear winner. But now that I've actually beaten the game, has my opinion changed, and is it all that bad? Well, first I want to give you a little bit of background on the game so that I can kind of set the scene for the rest of the video, as I feel this will give a bit more context as to why the game is the way that it is. So, Doom is well known for being one of the pioneers of the FPS genre, but it's also well known for being id Software's golden child. However, some of you may be surprised to know that id Software didn't develop Doom 64. Instead, it was a company by the name of Midway Games. Midway was an American game publisher slash developer, and they actually owned quite a lot of big names, such as Mortal Kombat, Rampage, no, not that Rampage, go away Dwayne Johnson. We're talking about the game, not the movie. But yeah, they also owned Spy Hunter, I don't know what that is actually. Yeah, they also had NBA Jam and NFL Blitz. Two things I know absolutely nothing about. Oh, and I forgot to mention, but they kinda don't exist anymore. As they did file for bankruptcy in 2009, with most of their assets being bought up by Warner Brothers. But long before that, they started Doom 64's development in late 1994, which means it wasn't too long after Doom 2 came out that they started developing Doom 64. 64 was eventually released on March 31st, 1997 as a direct sequel to Doom 2, exclusively on the Nintendo 64. I'd just love to play my Doom 2 sequel on the N64, with that controller. But honestly, compared to other games that were released around the same time, such as Quake 2, Doom 64 looks really dated, as it was still using the id Tech 1 engine that was used for the original Dooms, and of course it was only on the N64. And this isn't really a fair comparison, because Quake 2 is a PC game, and it wasn't limited by the small cartridge space that the N64 had. I mean, just look how horrible Quake 2 on the N64 looks. 3D games such as Quake 2 wouldn't really be possible on the N64 if you wanted to actually have like more than 2 enemies on the screen at once. But thankfully, I'm not playing this game on the N64 with that god-awful controller. I'm instead playing the game on Doom 64 EX, which is a brilliant source port. I would have used the game's Steam port, but I want to be able to look up and down. I know I may anger some purists by wanting to look up and down, but seriously I feel like it's a much better experience in the modern day. But yeah, let's stop wasting time and let's actually talk about the game itself. Doom 64 for the most part functions the same as the other classic Doom games. You spawn into a level, pick up a gun, shoot demons with said gun, find keycards to open doors, eventually find even more powerful weapons and fight even more powerful enemies with them. It's a rather simple design, but it works perfectly in my opinion. Due to Doom 64 working just the same as every other Doom game, I set the difficulty to the second highest one, which isn't called Ultraviolence this time, it's instead called I Own Doom. And I really went into this expecting it to be like Doom 1 and 2. I soon came to learn that this is neither Doom 1 or 2, and I don't own Doom. It's in fact Bethesda who owns Doom, well, now Microsoft. I think that's one of the worst dad jokes I've ever made. But yeah, in all reality, Doom 1 and 2 are really easy in my opinion, at least for most of the game, whereas Doom 64, Doom 64 is not that easy. I mean, it might be because I'm not as familiar with Doom 64, I've played Doom 1 and 2 a lot more than I have with 64, but even then, I actually died quite a lot during my playthrough of this game. But because of the Nintendo 64's small cartridges, you really couldn't have that many enemies on screen at once. So what was the solution for this? Well, to get around this limitation, they used the Quake style strategy of just making all the enemies really difficult. With Quake, the game really had to adjust itself for being one of the first 3D games. There couldn't be that many enemies on screen because back then people's computers would have lit on fire, so it just made all the enemies really tanky. Doom 64 does the same kind of thing here. Instead of just making the enemies tanky, they use the more difficult demons around the maps, and a lot of the maps where they use a lot of demons are a lot smaller than what you'd see in your typical Doom level. Take the Spiral for instance. This level had so many enemies I had to camp in the first room and rely on infighting to even get past the first bit of it. Another difference with this game compared to the original games is that it's a lot more atmospheric, and it has a lot more of a horror atmosphere compared to Doom 1 and Doom 2, which is something that we'll get a bit more into depth with when we talk about the music later in the video. But this change in atmosphere is what I assume led to a lot of the changes in the art style. The first two games felt a lot more bright and colourful and a lot more playful compared to Doom 64. Of course, Doom 64 makes great use of colours, but again, it doesn't feel as playful as the older games. It feels a lot more gloomy and filled with dread. Again, you can kind of compare this to Quake, but thankfully Doom 64 isn't comprised of the colours that were used on most early 2000s military shooters. But this atmosphere in Doom 64 is actually something I really like. Something I don't like for the most part though, is the enemy redesigns. And you'll see why in just a minute. Because oh my god, some of these redesigns are absolutely horrid. First off, I'll show you the less offensive ones, because some of these are actually really cool. The Imps, Arachnotrons, Barons of Hell, Hell Knights, Pinkies, Zombie Men, Lost Souls, and the how did I mess that up? Cyber Demon. They all look really cool, and they fit with the game's art style and also their previous iterations in the series, except the Arachnotron. He looks a bit different. However, this redesign is quite good in my opinion. And just like the Zombie Man and the Nightmare Imp, I feel like he had a lot of influence on Doom Eternal's version of the Arachnotron. However, I could be wrong, because there's no like reference images of him in... Hold on, wait a minute. There's no reference images of the Arachnotron from 64 being in this book. I just realised that's backwards, isn't it? But anyway, let's move on to the worst ones. So now, brace yourself for these monstrosities. So, the Mancubus just looks goofy. I just don't like the way he looks. I mean, it's nothing horribly bad. He looks like a Mancubus, I guess. He kind of looks like if the Mancubus was like stretched up a bit and like made like less... The Mancubus lost some weight, let's say that. Next up we have the Caco Demon, who for some reason doesn't look like a Caco Demon. He instead looks like a Pain Elemental, for some reason. Someone at Midway definitely looked at Doom 2 and they're like, oh, that must be a Caco Demon. But yeah, if this was the design for the Pain Elemental, I wouldn't mind. Let's get to the design for the Pain Elemental. Okay, Pain Elemental, but I don't even know what to say about this thing. I don't even know what this is meant to be. How did we go from this to this abomination? But yeah, the enemy redesigns are fine, I guess, because the enemies are still fun to fight, except the Pain Elemental, he's the worst. You'll notice as you get further into the game that it really loves using Pain Elementals, Barons, and Hell Knights, like literally everywhere. Like I said earlier in the video, this is because they can't have that many enemies on the screen at once, because of the amount of storage it would take up on the tiny little N64 cartridges. But yeah, these enemies are everywhere, and if there's powerful enemies everywhere, there has to be some powerful weapons. Well, yeah, actually there is. And the weapons of Doom 64 not only look great in the new art style, but they also feel great to use, except one or two of them, which I'll talk about in a minute. It's pretty much all the guns from Doom 2, plus the Unmaker. And come to think of it, the Unmaker is one of those pretty bad weapons. I mean, I didn't get all the demon keys, well, I didn't get any of the demon keys because I didn't know where they were, and I didn't want to look up a guide for them. So for most of my playthrough, I just used the BFG, because it was a more powerful option for me. And another one of the weapons I don't really like is the Super Shotgun. I mean, it's fine, and it works just the same as Doom 2's Super Shotgun, but it's nowhere near as satisfying. It just looks horrid, and in comparison to Doom 2, it just feels lazy. Doom 2 had a really cool reloading animation for the Super Shotgun, and Doom 64 has... That's it. You just move the gun back and forth. Look at this. I don't know about you, but I'd much prefer having Doom 2's animation. I know they had to account for the memory on the game's cartridge, but at the same time, they have the pistol in the game, and that gun is literally useless. Because you get the shotgun as soon as you start the game, so there's no point in even having the pistol. They might as well have not had the pistol in the game and used that to save up on extra memory space to actually animate the Super Shotgun. As I feel that having an animation for the Super Shotgun is a lot more important than the pistol, because you literally never use it. Not even in the first level. At least most of the weapons sound good, I guess. And actually, I'm using this same segue as I did in the last video. Let's talk about sound. If you don't really know much about this game, or haven't played it before, then you might just think that its soundtrack is the same as all the other Doom games. You know, like this. But you would be wrong. This game doesn't really have a normal soundtrack. Bobby Prince's amazing MIDI metal music was swapped out for Aubrey Hodges' more ambient, this music. This music sounds like the sound equivalent of putting your hand into a deep fryer, but that doesn't mean it's bad.
Still, please do not put your hand into a deep fryer.
I in fact actually really like it for the normal levels in this game, but none of the music in this game compares to the amazing tracks that Aubrey Hodges made for the main menu, the credits, and that intermission theme tune. Oh my god, it is so good. This track is so good when you finally finish a level, and it makes you feel so rewarded, even if you found like 2 secrets in the level. But yeah, with the ambient tracks in the game, it really reminds me of Doom 3 in a way. Doom 3 had a pretty much entirely ambient soundtrack, and it worked wonders for that game, and Doom 64 has the same kind of effect. I think there's a lot of room for ambient music in the Doom games, as you can see in even the new Doom games. However, I do wish there was some more interesting tracks in the game. But there is some things that I don't really like in the game, and I'd like to talk about them for a bit. My main issue with the game is that some of the levels feel like they can go on forever, and I just think there's a bit too much switch hunting and backtracking in the game for me. And despite the level's small size, they can often drag on for a really long time. And although I enjoyed the challenge of the game as well, on occasion the game really annoyed me with the pain elemental spam. But overall, that's really the only issues I have for the game. I admittedly misjudged this game when I first played it, but even then this game isn't bad, and in fact I think it's a really good game. But now that we're done with Doom 64, what do we do now? Well, there's a little game called Fest that you may or may not have heard of, and I really think that you should play it. But why? Well, click on this video right here to get even more convinced.